Character name, Nero. Potentially, Nero Blackstone. If so, it is highly likely that Nero Blackstone is actually a stage name inspired by the likes of the great Harry Blackstone Sr. As, for now, no birth name or date is known, we will continue to refer to the character in question as, quite simply, Nero. Character occupation, magician and theatrical performer. Character family, wife, deceased. Character status, unknown, possibly deceased. Early life. Nero was born into enormous wealth. His clothes were made by the finest tailors, and the lackeys and sycophants that surrounded him at every moment provided unerring praise and attention. It is safe to say he was born with a silver spoon in his mouth. He affirms this himself, with the addendum that he has done his fair share of shoveling. His family's estate was booming, so much so that they did not need hesitate to hire new staff to deal with the smallest of inconveniences, such as overgrown vegetation on their grounds. All of the family's needs were met. Nero's life was easy. Perhaps too much so. As he grew up, things began to change. In his younger years, he was bullied, and the constant pampering at home only served to further his deeply misplaced arrogance. Career. Nero eventually tumbled into the world of theatre, calling himself the Amazing Nero, dealing in misdirection and theatrics. To prepare himself for a career he felt was assured to make him a long-standing Broadway great, he spent some time researching the art of magic, and even ventured into studies of rituals and the devil's magic to try and further his craft. His thirst for admiration haunted his every step. He established a workshop in which he spent hours creating props for illusions he hoped would be truly spellbinding for his audience. It was within this very workshop that he would later commit the heinous crime for which the Shadow Man would punish him so severely. At some point, Nero came into the possession of an extremely important book, which would soon play a pivotal role in his plight within Morg City. The method by which Nero acquired the book is currently unknown, but its significance cannot be understated. The book contained myriad secrets, from the undead Nero would soon face in Morg City, to the Apothicon race of squid-like monsters, a force of great evil locked in battle on the city's doorstep. Of all the writings he came across in his research, this book was unique in the fact that it deeply affected Nero. He shied away from it, as its very contents petrified him. It made him uncontrollably afraid, so much so that it infected his dreams from the moment he first laid eyes upon it. Even much later, when Nero used that very same book to fight back against the forces of the Phantom Apothicon menace, it gave him nightmares. Nightmares of strange, ancient artifacts sought by the Apothicon race, and the ethereal messenger they sent forth, known only as the Shadow Man. The contents of the book, its prophecies, and the nature of the Shadow Man himself will be explored further in other character bios. As Nero honed his magical methods, he realized he would need an assistant. It's unclear how many he went through in his career, but regardless, his final assistant ended up taking his hand in marriage. Marriage. Nero's marriage was not a happy one. No matter what he did, his wife complained. If Nero was busy working on his act, she moaned that he wasn't paying her enough attention. And if he then did less, so as to appease her, she lamented his laziness. A void grew between the pair, and the emotional repercussions of their faltering relationship affected each of them differently. For Nero, the failure of his marriage consolidated his feelings of loneliness. Money simply couldn't make him happy. It never had done, and it never would. And now, nor could his own wife. He had but one friend in the world, his lawyer. Nero's wife, on the other hand, took to spending excessive amounts of Nero's money on fine, luxurious clothing, perhaps in a futile attempt to resolve the lack of love she felt from her husband. Alternatively, it is possible that she married Nero for the sole purpose of absorbing his once flourishing family estate, and thus spent money wherever she felt like it simply because she wanted to. The evidence is somewhat ambiguous on this point. Demise. It didn't take long for Nero's arrogance to catch up to him. Alongside his usual tricks, such as the serpents from beyond, knives of death, and Hindu sword basket, he attempted to perform one known as the amphibious man. This disregard for his own safety landed him in a coma which lasted an entire month. This coma would in many ways dictate the trajectory of the rest of his life. As a result of the foolish act, Magicians Weekly published a front-page article focusing on Nero's fast-crumbling career. A career that they cheekily stated had gone up in smoke. No more would he ever be lauded by fans desperate to meet him, obsessing over his posters. They named him Worst Magician of the Year. When Nero recovered from his coma, he found himself in a large amount of debt. Once, his family estate could have absorbed the economic shocks of his failings, but no longer. His finances were in turmoil. He reached out for help from the one person he felt he could trust, his lawyer, who started an investigation of his own. Following their discussion, he contacted his insurance company and inquired into whether his and his wife's insurance was paid up. Upon hearing that it was, the desperate magician devised a plan to remedy his monetary woes. Unbeknownst to Nero, the loan documents were actually fraudulent. His wife had forged Nero's signature on the loans, dated November 5th, despite his having been in a coma for the entire month. However, this information was not forthcoming until it was too late. Nero fixed his wife to a large wooden wheel, under the pretense of practicing their Wheel of Death trick. He proceeded to kill her on the spot. Nero 1, wife nil. Interdimensional convergence. The Shadow Man then captured Nero during a trip to the Black Lace Burlesque, alongside 3 other occupants of the city in which they lived. They were Jessica Rose, Jack Vincent, and Floyd Campbell. They awoke in a world shifted slightly from its rightful place in the universe, a new, fractured version of Morg City. Side quest. The quartet were informed by the Shadow Man that their world was under attack, being overrun by the ancient order of the Keepers. They sought to help their newly found spectral ally so as to try and save their world and return to their former lives. Each of the characters were instructed to pick up items linking them to the previous world which they inhabited, and they then had to sacrifice a member of that old world. For Nero, that was his lawyer, his only friend. The quartet were told by the Shadow Man to place 4 gateworms on specific podiums inside the sacred place attached to the subway system. They were under the impression that the Shadow Man was leading them to salvation. To their dismay, they were double-crossed by him, and their actions brought Earth one step closer to absolute apocalypse. As such, they used Nero's abominable book in conjunction with the summoning key found within the streets of the city to turn the proverbial ritual tables on their alien messenger and banish the evil force looming over the city. Upon exacting their revenge, a keeper turned to Nero and professed the summoning key. Before he could take hold of it, Dr. Edward Richtofen stepped through a portal and claimed the artifact for himself, before leaving the way he came. Quotes and trivia. Nero's investigations into the world of magic stand him in good stead. He has a fairly strong grasp on the events unfolding within Morg City, despite their sudden enveloping of his life. He explains that an interdimensional convergence has taken place, with other galaxies and realities bleeding into the reality in which he lives. He identifies multiple interdimensional objects within the city, such as the summoning key itself, and is keen to point out weapons he finds which are displaced in time or made of unnatural elements. Nero tries to establish a partnership with Jessica Rose. He tells her that she looks beautiful, and states that she reminds him of his wife, though nicer and markedly less dead. However, she is not receptive of his advances. At first, Nero scorns the boxer somewhat, casting aspersions on his intellect and trying to confuse him by using long words in yet longer sentences. However, as they battle their way through the city's streets, he warms to him, particularly becoming interested in Floyd's statement that the quartet are being punished due to the blood on their hands. He hopes that they can repent to absolve themselves of their past misdeeds. After all, Nero says, we've all shot somebody in the head before. Unlike the other two, Nero doesn't talk much with the detective. He states that only weak men find strength through liquor, a habit which Jackie is constantly battling with. He also begins to draw a connection between the Morg City Police Department and reports of prostitution going unhindered, but stops himself. After all, Nero is no stranger to the Ruby Rabbit or the Black Lace Burlesque. In fact, he's watched several performances there. Interestingly, Nero makes repeated complaints about the incessant noise that the zombie hordes make, wishing that they would stop screaming. He also questions whether he alone can hear the voice of the Shadow Man, evidence, perhaps, of a deeper underlying problem. Conclusion. Nero's fate is unclear. It is likely that he perished within the walls of Morg City along with his comrades, succumbing to the zombie scourge in the doomed reality in which he found himself stuck. Perhaps, though, we'll see more of Nero sometime soon. After all, only time will tell.